So, Russ, this week, you may notice there's a little difference in the beverage that I'm drinking.
Yeah, Look at that fancy glass.
It's a fancy brandy snifter, and I've got my Rémy Martin VSOP cognac, and that is because we are talking about lots of Mozart this week. It's so I felt like I had to kind of up the class level here, just to kind of feel Mozartian,
We're going first class this week.
Yeah, well, we're close to first class. This is it's a good cognac. It's not one of the really pricey ones, but it's actually pretty nice. I'm kind of enjoying this. Yeah, it's good. I like the glass too. I like these glasses. They look really pretentious.
Got to have the right glass for the right drink.
You can hold it like this and look like really snobby. It's
that looks
great.
Good. Yeah. I know. I'm gonna have to up my beverage game for the Adult Music Podcast.
Yeah, I do have a new bottle of Knobs Creek though for next week, so I'm ready to go with that Old Reliable here on the Knob Creek. Sorry, not Knobs Creek. I'm thinking of thinking of knobs. Oh man.
Oh wow.
All right. Anyway, we're back in autumn, and that means back to the hard liquor.
Hard liquor for autumn.
You've been going all through summer, I know, with the bourbon, but I got to lighten up in the summer.
Well, I started with a little Spanish wine
very
today,
nice.
And so this is just dessert.
Was it cold or was it?
No, it was a red one. What is it?
Is it sweet?
Reja Dorada, I think, or something like that. No, a nice dry Spanish wine. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't know much about those, I gotta say.
They're pretty good. Yeah.
All right.
So here we are. What is episode 29?
Oh, almost at 30.
Almost 30. Next week will be 30. And this week we have a European theme in both classical and jazz music.
Not only a European theme, we have a Mozartian theme in the classical end. It's a very Mozart week, and there's a lot of new Mozart coming out. Actually, we could even do an all Mozart show next week if we wanted to, but I think I'll spread those out a little bit. We'll see. There's a lot
might be a good idea,
Mozart out. There's a lot of good Mozart out and good performances. So you're gonna hear two of them today. There it is. I just told you. It's I like them all.
Yeah, these are enjoyable. Before we get into the program for this week, let's remind our listeners that in the episode description, you'll find links to Spotify and Apple Music for all the music we'll discuss this week. And also at the top of the description is a link to the full episode playlist. That's all the music in one place on our preferred streaming service, Deezer. You can also follow us there at username Adult Music Podcast and listen to the podcast on Deezer too. If you can't see the full description or list of the works on whatever app you're listening on, hop on over to our host, which is Podbean, Podbean, and everything is in the right format and easy to follow there. You can follow the listening links or links to the other information. And if you enjoy the podcast, please follow or subscribe on whatever app or platform you're listening to us on. If you take a moment also to give us a ranking or write a review, that will help us get listed in the browsing category recommendations, which will help us grow our audience, which we're always looking to do. And if you have anything more detailed or personal you'd like to get in touch with us about, comments or questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us directly by email. And our address is adultmusicpodcast, that's all one word, at gmail.com, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, please write to us. Also, listeners with very sensitive ears may notice I have good news for you. I no longer have a squeaky chair now. I've had a chair. I've been leaning back in my chair for the last few weeks, and it's been squeaking, and the mic has been picking it up. I noticed it myself, and Russ noticed it as well. And this week, I took a can of WD-40 and just sprayed it into the shaft of the chair, and it actually worked. It's like a miracle product. So I have like what feels like a new chair. It even leans back further too. It's pretty amazing. Wow. The evolution of the chair is actually pretty interesting because when in episode we occasionally do these together, and sometimes we're doing them over Zoom on in separate locations, like today. But when we first started doing them in separate locations, I didn't even have a chair. I was sitting on the floor. I mean, we are in Japan, and I had this load table and tatami mat room. But since that time, I've moved, and I have like a whole setup here now. So I'm in a chair, but it was squeaking. Now it's not squeaky anymore. Just onward and upward here at the Adult Music Podcast.
That's right. When the R&M studio, soon we're going to have a special chair with our names on each
on the back of each, like a D.W. Griffith. That's or, well, who's the other guy? Cecil B. DeMille, right?
Yeah. So we're waiting as the support rolls in.
It's long, yeah.
Soon we'll be in our customized studio. But at least we have the important things where sound counts and content is most important. So onward and upward.
Yeah, we may even have videos on YouTube one day too. I imagine if we ever get our own sort of studio where we're together all the time, we'd probably do video, right?
I'm glad we'd held off because I wouldn't want, my fame to rise just because of my rugged masculine looks. So.
Yeah, I just don't want to have to shave and wear a nice shirt all the time.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah, we'll just make it by our mellifluous tones and interesting music. Then we can reveal our faces,
Yeah, and then people just, as usual, you see the person's face and you're just totally shocked. The voice doesn't ever go with the face, Like all those radio DJs when you were a kid and you saw them on TV and you're like, oh, that's her, that's him, that's her.
Oh yeah, that was Casey Kasem? Oh my God.
Casey Kasem was only one of many.
Yeah, just many, yeah.
Who was the WPLJ? Carol Miller.
Oh,
remember her? Did you listen? Were you in New York? Did you hear PLJ?
I've heard of.
You're too far north.
It's a long time ago, but
yeah, she was one of WPLJ FM's big DJs. A lot of us had a big crush on her back in the day, and that she was on some TV show. I was like, oh, that doesn't look like her. I mean, she was really pretty, but I just didn't. That wasn't the face that I imagined when I heard that voice.
A face for radio and a voice for print.
Oh, yeah. A voice for print. Yeah, there you go. All right. So
anyway, we have some sweet tones for any instruments this evening, beginning with lots of Mozart.
Yeah, and in fact, we're going to start out with a pretty major Mozart release, and because it's by the pianist Víkingur Ólafsson, Icelandic pianist who's really making a big splash in the classical music world these days, at least as far as recordings go. And well, no, definitely even in the concert hall, but I haven't actually heard him play live yet. I don't go to concerts anymore either. Here in Japan, in where we are in Kansai. I mean, if you live in Tokyo, you're all these people come by and you can hear them usually for an exorbitant price. And only some of them come to the Kansai area, so we don't get to hear them too often, and they're very
few
expensive.
After the nuclear accident and earthquake. There's not been much, and now with COVID,
we have great concert halls here, though. So it's a shame, really.
Something to hope for.
Yeah, they. But when pianists of this caliber play here, they usually charge a lot of money to go because there's no. You're really paying the whole cost as the ticket buyer. Usually, like in at least in the United States, things are kind of subsidized by, I don't know, very rich people or some, foundations or anything. Yes. Yeah, benefactors or whatever. So the prices aren't that big, but not in Japan. you gotta really reach into your pocket here.
Yep.
Okay, so anyway, our first album for this week, this is a major release in the classical music world, Víkingur Ólafsson, Icelandic pianist. The album is called Mozart and Contemporaries, and it's on the Deutsche Grammophon label. And this is making a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot of noise, it's making a lot of mellifluous sounds around the world. I think everybody's loving this record. It's really excellent. To begin speaking about this, the first thing we want to talk about, I think, is the album cover, because it's caused some eyebrows to be raised. Let me kind of explain. It's a picture. You should take a look at this, by the way. Get on the internet. Mozart and Contemporaries. It's a picture of Ólafsson. It looks like a sort of picture that's been sort of manipulated into a sort of graphic design. Sort of. It doesn't look like looks like a photo that's been made into a high-res painting or something. And it's a picture of him, and his face is reflected on some invisible surface, so you see his face upside down as well.
He's holding a black face, yeah.
Yeah, he's holding a long black feather, and here's the shocking part. Are you ready? The black feather is over part of the famous Deutsche Grammophon yellow cartouche that they have on all of their album covers.
Yeah.
Deutsche Grammophon, I understand. I heard Ólafsson speak on about this on the Grammophon podcast recently. Is the oldest record company in the world. They're more than 120 years old, and this cartouche has never been covered by anything. It was always in the foreground, and this is the first time ever in their 120-year history that a part of that black feather is covering. Or it's not covering anything. It's just on top of the cartouche.
That cartouche is excessively large. It takes up 1/4 of the cover,
Yeah, they're not as ornate anymore, though. They used to have all these like scrolls on the sides, all these kind of like Baroque, almost sort of like scrolling designs. Now it's a little more simple. It's a little simpler, as we say. But so there it is. Ólafsson mentioned that he had a lot of meetings with the DG staff about this. The president, he had to talk to the president of the company about why he wanted to do it. About why he wanted to do it. I'll explain that in a minute. And they finally agreed, and it's the first time this has ever been done in Deutsche Grammophon's history. And the owner of the record label assured Ólafsson that it would be the last time the company ever did that. So this is actually a bit of a collector's item. You should pick it up just for that.
And I should say that this CD is quite a bargain right now if you want to purchase the physical media. Strangely, the CD is available for less than you can download the MP3 for, much less than the CD quality FLAC download. And the high-res versions, if you're into that kind of thing, are exorbitantly priced. Of course, you can enjoy this on streaming because it's widely available, but if you do like to collect physical media, this one is quite a bargain. And I'm thinking of picking up this and a few other of his recent releases because Grammophon is quite reasonable on their prices for physical media. And this would be one definitely you want to add to your collection on the shelf if you're oriented in that way.
Yeah, because it's an excellent performance, and we're going to talk about that right now, and because it's probably going to be a collector's item. This is really going to be a trivia question one day for questions. What's the only Deutsche Grammophon album where the part of the cartouche is overlapped by the cover design?
It's a Jeopardy question, right? Album
it'd be like a Jeopardy question, yeah.
400.
Yeah, kind of like which people try to catch me on these some of these questions. This would be a question I would know this one now because of this, but these types of questions I don't know. I'm not that fanatic. I'm a pretty fanatical record collector, but I'm not this fanatical. There are people who are beyond me as far as fanaticism goes, if you can believe it. But I don't. Anyway,
let's get into the music here.
Let's get into the music. Okay. I should mention about the feather. The design team and Ólafsson himself decided to do this because the black feather is for the dark, introspective Mozart that we hear on this album, basically, because all this music comes from the 1780s.
Mature Mozart, yes.
It's mature Mozart. It's from the 1780s, and remember, he died in 1791. At only 36 years old. What was it? 35 years old. And that's something to think about. People will talk about the music he did in the 1780s as Mozart's late Mozart. But, of course, when Mozart was writing this music, he wasn't thinking that it was his late period. He wasn't. Yes. He was expected to live another 35 years at least. So I always find that a little odd. These people who have died young, and you're talking about that late period when they're 34 years old. They didn't really get a chance to reach that period. You don't know what they would have done, especially considering what Beethoven did. Mozart probably would have been, responding to that in some way. It would have been interesting to know what would have happened. Okay, so the black feather, dark constricted Mozart, and also the feather covers the cartouche because Ólafsson wanted to send the message that Mozart, the cartouche represents tradition. The yellow Deutsche Grammophon cartouche, it's 120 years old, tradition. And Mozart always gave tradition a little twist. This is according to Ólafsson. You can listen to the Grammophon podcast. He talks about all of these things there. So the covering, it's sort of indicative of Mozart kind of giving tradition a little twist. All right. So there you go. That's why it's there. Okay. On to the music, which is really the most important part. Okay. So we're already kind of excited about this. Okay, so he's mature here. And the album's called Mozart and Contemporaries. There are 4 other composers on this album. From the Austrian and German side, Joseph Haydn and Cpe Bach, both friends of Mozart. Haydn was much older. Haydn was more Mozart's father's age, but he was a little bit of a surrogate musical father to Mozart. He was a nice guy, Haydn, whereas Leopold Mozart, Mozart's actual father, also a composer and musician, was not a nice guy to Mozart. He had a lot of trouble. The two of them didn't get along, let's just say. And Mozart, his whole trip to Austria was breaking free. He didn't take a court position, which would have been the thing to do at the time. So he tried to get subscription concerts and that sort of thing. And that's where all this music comes from. His subscription concerts, and also from works he wrote for students of his. He didn't make the money that you would have made, that a man like Haydn made, because Haydn worked for the Esterházy court, so he had this steady income. But Mozart had to teach, and he wrote a lot of pieces for his students as well, and we hear a few of those on this album too. Cpe Bach he was a little older than Mozart, but he was pretty much Mozart's contemporary, I guess. You can kind of see why Mozart liked Cpe Bach's music. It was Cpe Bach, Gottfried Emanuel Bach, had a sense of humor that Mozart would have appreciated. He would kind of interrupt a lot of the melodic, the rhythmic patterns in his music. He sets you up, and then
he pulls the carpet out from under you, yeah.
Right, and this is the kind of humor that Mozart liked, okay? And Mozart does it too, but he does it so much more elegantly. Cpe Bach is a little gruff in his approach. But it's fun. It's actually, especially Cpe Bach's music is fun for our era, especially.
Yeah, and he has those like great sort of rhythmic figures and tempos that he gets rollicking along. So he's really identifiable once you get to know his style.
Right. The other 2 composers on the album are Italians, Baldassare Galuppi and Domenico Cimarosa, who both belong to the same ecosystem of 18th century music as Mozart, but I don't think the Mozart actually knew them. I didn't really do so much research into these 2, but I think they may have been active in Italy. I don't think they came to Austria to make their music.
Galuppi seems to be a different, different style completely, so...
He's older, too. He's the oldest composer on the album, born in 1706, so he's older than Haydn.
Yeah.
Remember Mozart was born in 1756. Yeah. Haydn and Mozart, the thing to understand is Haydn and Mozart really invented the classical style, this whole idea of the line and all the different voices kind of in communication with each other. Before and after the Baroque style, so between Baroque and classical, there was something called the Gallant Style, which was something that was all surface. It was just this elegant surface, and there wasn't really much depth to it. Mozart and Haydn brought the depth. And Galuppi and Cimarosa really were more in the Gallant style. And
so is very gallant, yeah. Cpe Bach is maybe sometimes categorized that, but I think, he's more far-reaching than...
he's got content, but I don't think he has any darkness in his music, whereas Mozart very emphatically does, as we'll hear. Okay, all right. Now, these 2 composers. One of the things Ólafsson hoped to achieve on this album is by mixing Mozart's celebrated music with more obscure music from the era. He wanted to slightly alter our psychological attunement by removing some of the baggage we all bring with us as we come to Mozart's music. Obviously, I read that from the
So this
the
is going to be therapeutic.
It's therapeutic for us. Because we think of these guys, Mozart, the giants, right? And they are. They're really some of the best composers who ever lived. And if anyone wants to dispute that, I mean, it's really inarguable. Mozart, it's like miracle after miracle, a lot of his music. He really was at some peak of musical, comprehension and understanding at the time. Okay, people alive in this era, of course, would have been familiar with music of Mozart's contemporaries as well as his, so he would have been one among many. And Mozart's music wasn't as appreciated as it is today when he was alive. Okay, it was complicated. It was, it doesn't sound that way to us, but again, it was all very fresh and new at the time, and people had trouble following it. There's that famous line in the movie Amadeus, which really shouldn't be taken as biographical. It's really not like that, but it has a lot of like truth to it, like general truth. When I guess it was the emperor heard one of Mozart's opera, and he was asked what he thought about it, and he said, "Oh, too many notes." Okay, so it's too complicated for his simple mind, basically. Okay, and these were people who funded the arts, who but maybe he was a fairly musically sophisticated guy, but Mozart was just like leagues above all these people, and it probably took a while for the world to really grasp what he had done, and he died all too soon, of course. Okay, there are people alive in Mozart's time who were probably avid music listeners who may not have ever heard Mozart's music. It's possible, although I guess the operas you would have known. Le Nozze di Figaro, Don Giovanni, they were very popular, and people would sing them in their homes, because, operas weren't like playing all the time like they are in New York or in Europe today. So you'd have to, get the sheet music, go home and have people in your family sing it while you played the piano, or vice versa, or whatever. Okay, there were music-making families among the bourgeoisie of the time. Okay, Baldassare Galuppi, widely celebrated in his day, but forgotten outside of Italy once the 18th century ended. He's very much in the Gallant style. It's all very pretty music. I mean, it's the lines are all very clear, but harmonically it doesn't really do all that much. It's very much remains on the surface, and it just remains this charming, delightful sort of I hate to say wallpaper. It's not. It's more than wallpaper. It's actually very good. It's very appealing and charming, but it doesn't go beyond charm. That's the thing about it. Ólafsson chose to include him because of a video recording of Arturo Benedetti Michelangeli, of the great 20th century pianist, playing the C major Sonata number 5 in 1962. And Galuppi opens the program. We hear his very pretty Andante Spiritoso movement from Piano Sonata number 9 in F minor. Now, Ólafsson doesn't play any complete Galuppi sonatas. He just plays movements. And that's kind of a shame. I wish he would have chosen one of them. No worries. I have remedied this problem by including an entire album of Galuppi's sonatas. We'll talk about that next. Okay, and here we get to hear just what a magnificent pianist Ólafsson is. He has this light touch, and he gets this gently percussive effect. It's amazing. It has to be really close miking that kind of achieves this. I can't imagine you're going to hearing the hammers hitting the strings like this in the concert hall. I'm going to have to go hear him one day. It makes the work leap out. I mean, it sounds very appealing in his hands. He merely makes everything very appealing. Okay. He's a good. This work is really over way too fast. It's really nice. Okay, and his playing of it is just so magnetic. I would have liked to have heard the whole work, the whole sonata, the whole 3-movement work. Okay, the second movement, Mozart, Rondo in F major, K494. These rondos that Mozart made. Now remember, a rondo, it's a theme, then you depart from the theme, come back, depart, come back. So it goes around. Rondo means round in Italian. And this was also a form of music known in England as well. Okay, in this piece, though, Mozart doesn't follow, the tradition very strictly. The rondo theme is heard 4 times, but you never hear it the same way twice. It's really inventive. Like, he just kind of alters little notes in the rondo theme. It's really fantastic. Also, make sure you notice the differences by the way he phrases too, because he sort of slightly changes the phrasing to make the the changes, the differences in the melody leap out. They're very subtle. They're very small. I mean, the whole melody, the outline is still the same, but they're just occasional different notes. Like one time they'll be like grace notes, or another time they'll be like a little pause or something like that. So listen to that when you listen for that when you hear this work. Okay, and
both in the Galuppi and here, you'll get a sense of his incredible, sensitivity of articulation, which is
Ólafsson.
Great. Yeah, Ólafsson's playing.
Yeah.
And also the dynamics, the contrasts on all these pieces are really nice, especially on this rondo. But, often we hear Mozart played very, how can I say, lightly.
Right.
Or, sort of, and I don't want to say, because light can be good, but in any sense of this classical period, sometimes the music doesn't have weight. But I feel that Ólafsson's playing is got a lot of weight and sort of gravitas in the way that he uses his left hand. And so he really roots even some of the lighter works so that they really get a foundation and draw you in with, especially the way that he uses his right hand. Even when his right hand gets very fleeting on some of the lighter tones, he always has this sort of authority in the harmony and in the lower notes that sort of somehow even makes the ornamented passages seem very sincere and serious. So you don't sort of get off into flights of fancy that you think, oh, this is just pretty. I always found that he drew me in to listen to things as a serious statement, regardless of the mood of the piece, which I found it's something to do with his touch and the sort of authority that he brings in the way he attacks the keys.
Right, and we had just mentioned that Galuppi's music is very surface. It's very galant, right? And yet that Galuppi movement and the other ones we hear on this album come across as having a little more weight than you generally think when you hear these works. Yeah. It's because of his playing. It's pretty remarkable. So you have a great composer in Mozart, and you have a great pianist here. And boy, the fireworks happen. He has this way of you say the light touch. He also likes to play melodies staccato. He does this a lot. He doesn't really do much legato or connected playing. Staccato means like you're just kind of playing the note and like letting it go, and the notes don't really connect. Although you can hear the connections in the way he phrases, right?
Yes.
But he seems to like that a lot, and he alters his staccato. He starts with the staccato, and then he alters it with each return of the melody. It's really inventive playing, absolutely fantastic in this piece. So right away, only 2 tracks in, I'm just fascinated. This is going to be a very long time that we're talking about this album, because it is really remarkable. It must be heard especially if you're a fan of Mozart, or if you want to hear some great piano playing. That staccato approach he uses, we heard it a lot. He made a recording of Bach works a few years ago, and another amazing recording, but all that staccato in Bach, I was kind of, the notiness of it was kind of starting to drive me crazy, even though the interpretations were really fantastic. It's a record I approach with trepidation, because I know it's really great, but I'm like, I don't know, don't want to hear it played this way. I don't know, it's sort of like that. I didn't get that here, though. I did like this record. All right, third track, we have Cpe Bach. That's Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach. That's the great Johann Sebastian Bach's second son and oldest surviving son. Okay. This is his rondo in D minor. So we get another rondo. So we already know the form. And this work dates from his later years, also the 1780s. So it's probably contemporary with the Mozart work that we just heard. It's an interesting contrast to the Mozart rondo, because he uses dynamics in his music to interrupt the steady flow of the musical line. This is typical of Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach. Thankfully, Ólafsson has the sense of humor necessary to put this music across. Some pianists don't. They don't really get it. They just play through. But Ólafsson does. He does have this. Okay, the rondo melody has quirks in it, and that they're really appealing to hear. I'd love to hear actually Ólafsson do a whole album of Cpe Bach. I bet it would be really great.
He gets the humor here.
It.
And then, but also the fast figures are really amazing on this. The technique really
that's true too.
blows you away. And the other thing I was thinking with this album, even though as we're just getting into it, as it goes on towards the end, it's more Mozart heavy. But he has, as an artist, an interesting concept of the programming, because I'm imagining if they let him get the feather, over the gramophone.
The cartouche.
Cartouche. Yeah. That he also has license with deciding on his program. It's not in sort of the promotion and production. So when he decides the order and the sort of programming, I think he's very deliberate with that. And so on the Rameau and Debussy.
Oh, that was fantastic,
which was a strange,
too.
Which on the surface seems like a strange combination, but he had a very deliberate plan in what he was doing. And I think he has that here as well. It's obviously, if you're saying Mozart and contemporaries, there have been a lot of these type of recently with like the Bavoise, Beethoven and contemporaries.
That was really good as well.
That was good too. But I think that Ólafsson has, there's something very specific about what he's doing with putting these pieces in the program here. So I think, we should pay attention to what's going on in his, not only the selections, but also the ordering that he's come up with here. Because I think he's taking you on a journey for, following his approach to this music.
Right. That Jean-F on Bavoise record that you just talked about, Beethoven's Contemporaries, came out in 2020, I think.
Right.
And it was nominated for a Grammophon Award this year in the piano category, which it didn't win. But we'll be talking about that soon when we finally do our Grammophon Awards opinion podcast, which is coming up, I think, in a week and a half. We'll do it. Yeah. We'll do that as a special midweek episode. Okay, onward to track 4. We're only on track 4. Wow, so much. We've already had so much to say about this very weighty album. This is Cimarosa, the Italian composer. Sonata number 42 in D minor, which is in a single brief movement. Okay, the Cimarosa works are possibly complete in their single movements, sort of like Scarlatti, but we're not really sure. Due to the era when multi-movement sonatas were in style and possible single movements for longer sonatas, these Cimarosa movements are possibly single movements from longer sonatas. We don't know. They sound like they are, to be honest. Ólafsson has harmonized the Cimarosa works for the modern piano, because the original scores are sparsely detailed, so you can't just kind of play them, even like you could with a Scarlatti score. His harmonization sounds a little thick in places to me, because it doesn't have that light sort of thing that it kind of they almost sound romantic in a way. But overall, it fills out the texture very well. This particular sonata moves slowly and hauntingly. I had a haunting feeling for this. Ólafsson again making most of the contrast in his playing and programming. I think this is a movement from a longer work.
I wrote haunting too, and I also thought that what comes next, putting this before the Mozart Fantasia, was a really good choice of a sort of segue into what's coming next. There's just the right place to put this piece, and the way he did it leading into the Mozart was ideal.
Yeah, I actually wrote for the next one, Mozart Fantasy in D minor, a nice lead-in from the previous work, or my exact words.
Yep.
I noticed that too.
You picked it up too.
Yeah, it's this is fantastic programming. So if any listeners out there aren't very familiar with classical music, I mean, you'll get this. You don't really have he's an excellent host for this kind of music, or like presenter of this music. He makes you understand it. I think so. I think this is an excellent record for really anybody to hear.
And this one, that as the Cimarosa, it's, as you say, it seems to be a part of something bigger, but we don't know. But the Fantasia has a much more complex sort of overarching structure, but Ólafsson really gets the whole arc of this composition here. So although they're similar in sort of mood or character, I should say, the Cimarosa is sort of like an appetizer for the Mozart, which has this big arc which he understands fully and is prepared for. And so he gives you that appetizer, and this is sort of the main course of something different before we go back to the other rondos. So I really thought that was a nice, sort of turn in the programming.
Yeah, it's a pretty magical moment in this whole album as well. Okay, the work in question is Fantasia in D minor, K 397. K, by the way, for those of you who don't know, means Kerschel. Kerschel was the man who organized, he was a big Mozart fan. He organized all of his music after Mozart died. So he's honored by his ordering system. Okay, is still used today, although it's been changed a little bit. Okay. So a nice lead in. Ólafsson here manages to get a softly struck, very quiet sound at the beginning. Absolutely magical. It evokes a sense of mystery. And he keeps this creeping sense of intensity going throughout the 6-minute work. It's a very original approach. And in fact, I don't know any pianist who can get this kind of sound. It's really amazing. I've never heard this rather cerebral work from Mozart played this way. Ólafsson also makes sure we hear the brief resemblance to Chopin's Raindrop Prelude. The later, Chopin came later, at around the 3-minute mark, by the way he weights the bass, like the bass, dun, 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 dun. You hear just a brief moment or something like that. It really does kind of recall that Chopin Prelude. It's pretty interesting. Mozart forecasted a lot of the music that was to come, especially a lot of Beethoven. All right, number 6, Mozart. Track 6, D major rondo, K485. Okay, now the previous Fantasia that we heard, D minor, is unfinished. So Ólafsson ends it where the D minor section finishes on a dominant chord and leads it into the quick-paced rondo in D major. Okay, so so you have the dominant chord would be in A major, and instead of going back to the D minor of the Fantasia, it goes to the D major of the rondo. It's really clever. This work catapults us out of the Fantasia. It's pretty quick. It's lively, and we're in a different place now. So he's lifted the weight from our shoulders for the moment. Track 7, another Cimarosa work, Sonata number 55 in A minor. Also slow. It's a bit more classical era sounding than the more romantic number 42 that we heard before. Softly and beautifully played. And then we go after that to a 3-movement work, the first one on the album. So it's I think this is kind of a midway point, by Haydn, Joseph Haydn. Piano Sonata number 47 in B minor. We get all 3 movements of this work. The theme has a kind of lurching rhythm that makes it easy to identify in the development. So when you get to the middle part of the movement, it's pretty easy to remember this particular theme. And also Haydn had a sense of humor. It was different than Cpe Bach's, but he still had this sort of sense of humor, these little clever things that he would do in his compositions. And Mozart loved this sort of thing. Ólafsson doesn't play the repeat of the exposition in this work. Now, usually when you hear like the themes, the pianist will go back to the beginning and play them again to make sure that they're in your head. Ólafsson doesn't do this. He skips it. He goes right into the development, and this movement is very short, as is the next movement, the Minuet and Trio, which is a little odd. Okay, well, actually, no, it's only 3-movement work, so it's not odd. Okay. The Minuet has Haydn's usual charming figuration. Minuets are generally, it's a dance. They're usually pretty predictable. The Trio has a guitar-like bass propelling the melody, sort of like strumming sort of sound in the bass, like arpeggios. The movement is over before you know it, and then movement 3 comes, very quick, lightly percussive, and it's pretty short at 2 minutes and 9 seconds. It ends very abruptly. So this kind of has a bit of the Cpe Bach feeling to it, I thought. Track 11, Mozart Kleine Gigue in G major. I didn't even know this work. It's very short.
Really
It's got an odd off-kilter beginning, but it sort of writes itself by the end, and it's kind of shaped like a Bach dance. It's got 2 sections, both of which repeat. If you know the Bach suites, that's the form I'm talking about. And it's called a gigue, too, so I guess he's thinking of Bach there. All right, tracks 12 to 14. Mozart Piano Sonata number 16 in C major, K545. The Sonata Facile. If you played the piano, you probably played the first movement of this piece, and possibly all of it. Ólafsson in the booklet makes a big deal of how he learned to play this piece as a child, and he he said that it's a work that Mozart wrote in his later years for beginners. So it's not a work that a child wrote for himself to play. It's a work an adult wrote for a child, and for that reason, it's a bit difficult to play. Even though it's on all the it's in C major, so it's all on all the white notes of the piano, and that kind of makes a lot of the figuration, the really fast scales hard to play because they're all on the same level. Okay, although it's easy to read, obviously, because you have to think of where all the sharp and flat notes are. Okay, the staccato, he plays this kind of like as in his staccato style, and this is a really cheerful piece, but the staccato makes the piece rather dry sounding and notey. It's kind of like got this sort of ticking sort of sound. He's so engaging though in the way he shapes the phrases that I liked this. And any other pianist played it this way, I know I wouldn't have liked it. I'd like to hear it more legato. It's usually not my kind of playing for this piece. The second movement gets that gorgeous muted pinging sound in the piano strings that we heard in the opening Galuppi piece. I really love that. This is something it seems like only Ólafsson can do. It's very appealing. Ólafsson captures the sense of the child's innocent mind that this piece puts across. He says that this piece, people think about this piece as for children, but it's really a piece for adults who are looking back at childhood. And you should think of it that way, I think. That's pretty accurate. The lack of extraneous material in Mozart's music somehow magically lifts the extraneous thoughts and problems off of us. I got this idea when hearing this particular piece. Mozart may be the best example of the transcendence of art. There's a kind of magic in this music, and there's also a kind of magic in this performance that we just heard of this piano sonata. This is one of the most engaging performances of this work I've ever heard. Okay, after that we hear the closing. The closing rondo of that piece of the piano sonata in C major uses a lot of staccato as we heard in the opening, and it's so well thought out that you welcome the unusual approach. All of the harmonies crystal clear. All right, we still have some music to go here, though. Track 15, Adagio in E-flat major from String Quintet number 3 in G minor, Koschel 516, arranged by the pianist Víkingur Ólafsson. This is really odd. The string quintet. I know the string quintet fairly. Quintet. Sorry, that's 5 instruments. That's in his case 2 violins, 2 violas, and a cello. Okay, as for the Cimarosa, Olafsson's arrangement is a bit heavier than we would expect from Mozart, okay, pushing it slightly into romantic territory. It's really odd to hear this piece on the piano, to be honest, because I'm familiar with the string quintet version. Yeah, I'll have to get used to this. It's fantastic playing, as you'd imagine, but I think it loses some of the weight that it has when played as a quintet. There are some moments that really register, as you know, with the melodic and then the sort of this kind of heavy. It's not heavy, but it's heavy, but it's dark, but there's a kind of a weight being pressed on you that Mozart's able to achieve, and I don't really get that in this arrangement. There's some darkness in the movement that doesn't completely come across on the piano, so I thought this was kind of a, if you can call it that, a weak spot on the album, but there's nothing wrong with it, of course. It's very good. Okay, track 16, Galuppi again, Larghetto from Piano Sonata number 34 in C minor. Again, a single movement from a longer work. This starts with slowly cascading downward arpeggios. It's pretty, it wears out its welcome as the piece goes on because it just kind of keeps going. Also gets a lot of rhetoric out of this very spare movement, which is pretty impressive. Okay, and let's see, track 17 to 19, we get another Mozart sonata. This one is in C minor, a much darker key than C major. This is number 14 in C minor, K457. First movement, molto allegro. The opening chords burst out of the speakers after the quiet Galuppi movement. Ólafsson plays this one pretty straight with beautiful articulation throughout. I especially enjoyed the bubbly ending in the lower end of the piano. Second movement, Adagio. The melody is beautifully articulated. This movement is as long as the 2 outer movements put together. A big major Mozart composition here. There are hints of Beethoven's famous Pathetique Sonata slow movement. Very famous, you've all heard it. That movement was still a good 10 plus years away from this, so Beethoven was listening. This movement goes into more psychological depth than Beethoven's movement, which is unusual because Beethoven, as we know, goes into a lot of psychological depth, especially the string quartets. But just in this particular case, Mozart really achieves a lot of depth in this movement. Anyway, in the Pathétique, Beethoven's Pathétique, he had already expressed a lot of psychological depth in the first movement, so I think his second movement was supposed to be like a little vacation from that. Anyway, back to Mozart. The third movement, Allegro assai, has a lot of contrast and dynamics, with the movement starting with a vine-like winding melody, like a vine wrapping around a pole, that's interrupted by dramatic pounding chords. Beethoven definitely noticed this too. He does this sort of thing a lot. Okay, you can hear similar techniques in all of his piano sonatas. Okay, so Ólafsson makes the most of the contrast without going into the Romantic era level dynamics. Good for him. This movement has psychological issues. Not that there's anything wrong with the movement, but it's putting across psychological issues. Let's just say it that way. The winding melody is in a dark key area, and the pounding sounds come across like cries of anguish. It doesn't end with the tonality resolved. No, I'm sorry, I got this wrong. The tonality is resolved at the end, but the psychological issues raised during the movement are not resolved. Okay, so you kind of walk away with this feeling a little off kilter, I think. Okay, 2 more tracks left. Mozart Adagio in B minor, K540. This is another slow piece that goes into lonely, psychologically disturbed key areas. So we had all this kind of like contrast in the beginning, and now we've gone into this really dark place, and it's almost like we're descending into this depression that we can't get out of as far as Ólafsson's programming goes. This is also a fragmented melody, gets interrupted a lot, indicating interruptions of thought, and it's a pretty long movement. It's 7 minutes, 34 seconds. It resolves securely at the end, and we end with a religious work by Mozart, Ave Verum Corpus, which was a choral work originally, and this is an arrangement by Franz Liszt, so it's going to have sort of a romantic quality to it. Chiming tones at the beginning of what was originally a vocal work, Ólafsson has a real way with the holy stillness and tranquility of this piece. Excellent programming after the disturbing sonata and adagio that preceded it. So we get all this darkness in the sonata and the adagio, and at the end we come across pleading for mercy, and which we get from divinity itself, from God. Okay, an excellent release, great programming. And Ólafsson is a fantastic pianist who I'm just going to be following as long as I'm alive. I guess he's going to outlive me. Okay, a pianist who projects what I'm going to be sure to keep myself informed, whose projects I'm going to be sure to keep myself informed of. He's at the top of his game, both in his playing and in his programming. This recording is not to be missed by anyone. Please give it a listen.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Mozart releases focus on the pretty and the polish, and this one really gets to the depth, and he really draws you in and makes you see what's inside the compositions and the emotion behind them. And his playing has a lot of real good depth, and I enjoyed this a lot more than I do most Mozart sort of compilations. And the program is interesting with the contemporary pieces and the way he stitches them together to take you through this sort of journey here. So I found this one extremely interesting, and almost beyond comprehension of combination of all the things required for excellent playing with technique and tone, dynamics, phrasing. Everything's here. You can listen to this over and over and over and still find new things to fall for inside this recording.
Not only that, a composer like this with Mozart and a pianist like this who really gets the idiom very well together, it's just complete magic. One of the things about Mozart is one of my favorite composers. There's a kind of magic to his music that kind of puts me immediately, like at the snap of a finger, in a different place. And so I could hear Mozart. I guess it depends on the work, but it'll just put me in this much better, higher place, like closer to like an optimism, or even to almost a holy state, I guess you can say. Than
the divine Mike.
The divine Mike. I become the divine Mike. when I hear Mozart, when I was listening to this recording, I noticed this about myself, that I had just kind of completely changed and been absorbed in the program. And
that's
it
why your
reminded
chair
me
isn't squeaking. You're levitating.
That must be it. I must be levitating. But it reminds me of St. Paul, his words in the first letter to the Corinthians, where he says, "We will all be changed in an instant, in the twinkling of an eye." Okay, the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised, and we will be changed. And I feel that Mozart kind of almost taps into that kind of that ability to just change you in the instant. So he's got a bit of divine quality to his music. So look for that in yourself. Let us know if that happens to you. I'd be very interested to know. Okay. Anyway, on that recording, we heard a lot of some Galuppi, only single movements. And I was kind of curious about Galuppi's music. And it turns out that there's a new recording out on the Brilliant Classics label of Galuppi piano sonatas played by the Italian pianist Fernanda Damiano. Brilliant Classics is a Dutch label, and it's a bargain price, sort of like Naxos, right? So they're all cheap. Fantastic. So if you see something on the Brilliant Classics label, you can just snap it up for
Hey, Galuppi, who knew? It would be so cheap. Hey.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's him. It's there you go. Yeah, Galuppi really isn't a name I would choose if I wanted to change my Italian name to something else. I don't know. It's kind of like, hey, Galuppi,
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, so I wanted to hear that. Now I heard this. In my listening week, I heard the Ólafsson first. I really wanted to hear this album.
Yeah,
so I like this pianist a lot.
It's not really fair to come after Ólafsson, I have to say, especially for a young pianist.
And after Mozart, because like we said, Galuppi's music is more surface level. It's all about charm and surface beauty. Okay, there's not really any psychological depth
it's got
to
sort
it.
of that, scaled back harmony, especially I think this Gallant period, the left hand harmonization was, you don't have a lot of counterpoint and things going on from late Baroque. It's sort of minimalized kind of thing. So,
right, it's pretty and elegant. I mean, I would, it would behave well at a cocktail party. It wouldn't upset any of the tables or anything like that. All right, so I was afraid that after hearing Ólafsson, like this would be a letdown, but it really wasn't. I mean, I kind of knew that it wasn't going to be like the same as like the Mozart, the depth of the Mozart work, but that wasn't the case. Damiano turns out to be a very good pianist in her own right, and in fact, while Damiano doesn't have Ólafsson's subtlety, this recording came across to me as a breath of fresh air after all the calculation on Ólafsson's album. Great as it was. I mean, I really did feel the weight of that. And this album kind of lifted it off me a bit because there's not really
this is straightforward.
Much weight in it. It's very straightforward. And her playing is very bright.
But she has really good technique and good phrasing, especially for someone so young. And she just dives in. And, I mean, who else is going to have a whole program of Galuppi? So I think that sort of focuses her, and she has the right mindset to carry these pieces across in an interesting way.
Yeah, I really enjoyed her playing a lot. Actually, I was rather delightfully surprised by this. I was kind of expecting, I had low expectations going in, but not because of the pianist. I knew nothing about the pianist, but just because of what we had just heard, like one of the world's top pianists, as far as I'm concerned, just before it. Okay, so but she gives a good account of herself here. This is really good. This recording has a lot more room reverb than the Ólafsson recording, and that was also welcome. It was a little less stifling. The piano is well articulated in the space.
You get your head out from under the sort of cover and you sit back a little bit.
Yeah, Damiano doesn't have as many tricks as Ólafsson, and maybe that's not a bad thing. You kind of know what to expect here. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about the Gallant style, just so we know what we're talking about here. Gallant arose in opposition to Baroque's ornate, complicated textures. If you think of like the Brandenburg concertos by Bach, there's all kinds of motion going on, all of these different voices going at the same time. And Gallant wanted to get away from that, make something a little simpler. It emphasized light elegance, simplicity, immediacy of appeal. It's a good way to describe Galuppi, actually. Gallant would eventually give way to the classical style of Haydn and Mozart, which emphasized the musical line and reached greater emotional depths due to the use of contrasting key areas and extended developments. It's really the building of the key areas and getting far away from the main key that made classical music what it was. It became very psychologically complex. You could actually communicate a lot of psychology in music suddenly. So the Gallant style is kind of funny. There's nothing not to like, and yet it doesn't really stick with you. It's all surface charm. It's empty inside. It kind of reminds me of the Windham Hill recordings of the 1980s. It's sort of like the Windham Hill of its time. Who recorded for Windham Hill? Who's that? The pianist George Winston.
Something like that.
Yeah, George Winston. A good pianist, but again, not making big statements. Excuse me. Okay. Before we get to the music, let's talk about the cover of this one, because Fernanda Damiano, our pianist on this album, is a piano babe. She's very attractive in an innocent pose on the front cover. And if you have the CD, if you're lucky enough to have the CD, you can look at the back cover, and she's behind the piano, and she's got this "Come hither, look." And hither I came. Anyway,
I haven't seen the back cover.
I'll have to send it to you. I'll show you later.
Well, she does have the youthful charms in her look there.
Yep. Aging guys like us appreciate this more and more. It's kind of a shame, really, that it has to be this way. All right. Anyway, tracks 1 to 3, Piano Sonata number 2 in C minor. Now, to be honest, I don't really have much to say about this music. It's all kind of samey. The movements are very brief. Damiano manages the gravity of the first movement well. The main focus of this work is probably the second movement, the Allegro. It sounds a lot like the first music, like the first movement, and the Larghetto kind of acts like an introduction. It doesn't sound like the first movement. It sounds like this is the first movement, and the Larghetto is just an introduction to that. Damiano does have some phrasing tricks to keep it interesting, which is good. So she's actually a really excellent pianist. I wouldn't mind hearing more of her. There's a bit of drama in this particular movement. It's engaging, charming melodies, and it's interesting. Third, Allegro Assai is an engaging, straightforward piece for its period. There are contrasting dynamics, but he isn't after Mozart's depth of psychology here. I enjoyed Damiano's playing, and there are some impressive technical flourishes by her in this movement. A lot of quick scales. Okay. Should I go through all of these? I mean, they are all kind of samey, to be honest. I had to listen to this album in several sittings because it was all starting to sound a bit samey. There's not much depth to the music, but that's the Gallant style. It's all surface appearance. If you put this on, I mean, you won't be offended by it. You'll like it. It's a good music to cook to, or do something, or iron, or do some household chores to. I think that's why it was written, to be honest. It was written to be played and enjoyed, and just kind of, by people of its era. It's all charming and brief. How much of that can you take is the question, okay? Damiano does a lot to make each individual piece remain interesting, but from piece to piece was perhaps a little too much to achieve. Nevertheless, I want to say I enjoyed her playing a lot. Maybe in this program some non-sonata movements could have been included to break up the pattern, because we hear 6, I believe, 3-movement sonatas, and they're not very different from each other. Let me see here. Okay. Individually, each of Galuppi's sonatas are well worth hearing, but I don't know about in a whole program like this. Okay, so it's good. So if you're looking for challenging music, look elsewhere. We can't ask the Gallant style not to be the Gallant style. It's pleasant but forgettable, and that's why we don't hear much of it. And this is a nice listen, though, if you need to unwind. So I kind of recommend it with those, because of the piano playing, and with those reservations, okay, that it's kind of a little bit, a lot of the same. Yeah,
I mean, she's so young, and yet she has really excellent technique, very nice phrasing on these pieces. As you say, There's a lot of sameness, and it's generally straightforward. The melodies are good, and you can tell that she has a really great right-hand technique, but there's not a lot harmonically going on, and then also in the sort of exposition of that, because that's what's, part of the Gallant Style. So that's just the nature of the beast with this music. With a young artist like this, I'm sure she could have chosen to do, a program of variety of different pieces, her favorite composers or whatever, to show off her technique. So in that sense, I do give her a lot of credit, because who else was going to record a whole album of Galuppi? Probably no one. But I do like that she stuck with that and then presented that as, as best as she could, and honoring that whole style. So because of her effort, we can get a better sense of Galuppi's style rather than just, bits and pieces of something else. So I do admire that she, created this release just on one composer, especially early in her career. And I think that's important, because a lot of these composers that a lot of people don't know about, we may hear one work, but doesn't give us a big impression. But she has the technique and ability to, give us an impression of, the composer's, works on a larger kind of scale than we might get elsewhere. And she does a, really good effort. And I think she shows off that she's got a lot of skills, and she can go anywhere from here, being so young. And so, I think we're going to hear, big things from her in the future.
I'd like to hear her.
Yeah,
I'd like to hear her in more complicated music. I also want to applaud her because she's an Italian pianist, and she's promoting unknown old Italian music, and that's always good.
That's great.
When you kind of look into
someone
your
so young doing
past.
Such kind of old music that's also not well known. That's as the contrast there and the effort with it. I really appreciate that. So I think it's interesting.
Yeah, and again, it's not just that she has a great technique, and she's also got some good ideas. So she's able to manipulate the material so that on repeats, for example, she'll alter certain elements of the melody or rhythm to make it kind of jump out a bit more. Really an excellent pianist. I'm really looking forward to hearing more from her. I'm glad I heard this album. I hope I didn't make it sound I didn't dismiss it. I don't think it was worth going through the 6 pieces simply because they are sort of similar in kind, but I did enjoy this album, but sitting down and concentrating on it was too much. I probably should have listened to the whole thing while I was making my notes about the coming week's work or something like that.
Oiling your chair.
Right. Okay, now going from the simple to the complex, or oiling my chair, that only took a few seconds, really.
Okay.
I did have to take the back off, though, and it turned out there's a lot of dust in there, too. So actually, I'm really enjoying this chair now. It's fantastic. It's kind of...
I'm enjoying it, too.
You're enjoying my chair? Yeah, you don't have to hear these squeaks in your headphones anymore. Right. Well, there you go. Me neither. I didn't realize it was bothering me that much. Okay, our last recording in classical for the week is speaking of the complex, as far as the classical era goes, this is more Mozart. I decided to go with, to make like a Galuppi sandwich, shall we say, with the 2 Mozart slices of bread there.
Do I get provolone on that? Or
yeah, there you go. All right, this is Mozart's 3 of the 6 Haydn quartets played by the Quarteto Casals. They are a Spanish string quartet, and this is on the Harmonia Mundi label. Now, this particular quartet, I've been following them for quite a while, and they recorded, in the 1780s, this is the same period that Ólafsson covers on his album. Mozart wrote 6 string quartets, which he dedicated to Joseph Haydn, and he did that because Haydn had written 6 string quartets, Opus 33, in which he sort of reinvented the form. The Opus 33 Haydn string quartets made all of the instruments equal partners in this sort of musical dialogue. They all got to play the melody at certain parts, and it was almost like they were conversing. The instruments were conversing with each other during the piece. Mozart liked this style and really picked it up and ran with it when he wrote these 6 quartets for Haydn. Now, they were written over a period of, I think, 2 or 3 years. They weren't like released as a set. And they really changed music, and they're among my favorite works in the entirety of classical music, world music, whatever you want to say. I love all 6 of them. There is one of these that I like more than the others, but nevertheless, I can't do without any of these. Okay, so the Quarteto Casals they recorded the 3 other Haydn quartets that are not on this album way back in 2014. It's been a 7-year wait for them to complete the set. And because I love these works so much, I've been waiting, and I'm very happy to say that this is released. And these are excellent, just as good, if not better, than the first 3. Now, the first 3, I gave those another listen, and they sound fantastic. This ensemble uses sort of a lighter sort of sound. They didn't really get a sort of heavy sound that some of the older recordings had, like the Quarteto Italiano, a very famous set of recordings of Mozart string quartets, and one of my favorites, the Alban Berg Quartet. I have that on a Teldec release on 4 CDs, the late Mozart string quartets. Again, the late quartets, late in his career. I mean, he died at 35. You know, what would he have done if he lived to even Beethoven's age, you know? Anyway, the 3 quartets. This album, I think, is actually better than the first 3 that they recorded, because I think over the years they may have matured quite a bit, and they get a bit more depth of sound in this recording. They're beautifully recorded. The details are excellent in all 3 of these works. The first one recorded on this new album is String Quartet number 15. That's the second quartet in the set of 6 dedicated to Haydn. This is in D minor, K421. This is actually my favorite one of the entire set of 6. It's got a lot of weight to it. There's an opening descending cello line, chromatic descending cello line that kind of would indicate death, because the descending chromatic line generally was used in funeral marches. Dun 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 dun, you know, that kind of thing. It's a very sad piece, D minor being, I guess, a sad key. The quartet picks this up, just communicates this beautifully. I loved all the detail in this movement. It reminded me a lot of the Alban Berg Quartet recording. It's a little lighter in parts, like the second movement. A lot of the melodies are a bit, they're sort of a little bit of, clipped at the end to kind of give a bit more rhythmic bounce. But I liked that. I thought that was a really good approach. Tempos are all beautifully judged. These are very traditional performances. They don't really try to change these works at all, and I'm really grateful for that. These pieces haven't been recorded in a really long time, or they haven't been recordings by top flight string quartets in quite a long time either. So I was really happy to hear these. Okay, the third movement of the string quartet number 15 has this haunting, ghostly feeling to it, usually, that this particular recording doesn't really catch. But that didn't really bother me. They emphasized the rhythm a lot more in this, and I was happy to hear that. It was a nice difference of approach. And then there's the beautiful fourth movement of this with the set of variations on the opening theme, which gets slower and slower as it goes, and more weighty. And then at the end, it just goes back to its bouncing original theme when we hear that again. Really a fantastic performance. I liked it a lot. Okay, the second string quartet on this album is number 17. That would be number 4 in the Haydn set of 6. And this was nicknamed The Hunt. It's probably the most famous one of the 4, because the fourth movement kind of has this hunting horn, kind of like horse galloping sort of rhythm to it. The first movement melody is all very familiar. There are all these sort of nice little tricks to make them all fit together. And the quartet here makes sure that you hear like the differences in, say, variations in the second movement, where or the minuet and trio, where the ending of the the melody will go into the bass as opposed to like just continuing on the same frequency, the same line. There are all these nice little tricks in this. I love this work. It's fantastic, and they put it across very well. The last one is String Quartet number 18 in A major K464. This is Haydn Quartet number 5. This is a work that Beethoven really admired, and he copied the form of it in one of his early quartets. It's all constructed out of a single sort of motif, I guess you could say. The first one you hear in when the piece starts. Again, another beautiful performance. Again, reminiscent of the Alban quartets. Sometimes they'll go for like this rhythmic spring that the Alban quartet doesn't have, and I really sort of liked that. I thought it sounded really fresh. I think, though, that the Alban quartet and somehow the older quartets, the Quarteto Italiano, they achieve a lot more depth than modern string quartets have, and I think that might be because of the age we live in. It's just people aren't really kind of digging into those emotions that deeply. But I have no problem at all with this album. I think I'll be listening to this quite a lot. It's certainly not surface level. I mean, they do get into the emotions, but I don't know. Maybe it's just that I'm so familiar with those old recordings that I just kind of don't want to let them go. This will be in my rotation for quite a while, though. I like this a lot and highly recommend it. And if you don't know these works, you must hear them. They're just magnificent. Some of the 6 of the best string quartets ever written in the history of humanity. Give them a listen. And 3 of them are here, let's say. These are 3 of them.
Yeah, these are really nice. I thought the performances are really excellent.
Yeah.
And the recording is a delight to listen to.
I thought so, too. Yeah, you could hear all the middle voices really clearly, couldn't you?
Each musician here has their own individual tones matched beautifully, and then on a larger scale, the synchronicity of their playing is very admirable. I mean, they really act as one larger kind of musical organism, and so you get drawn into that sort of dynamic in their playing where they become as one. And then in the recording, the detail is very much highlighted, and also the spatial characteristics. So regardless of how you listen to this on your speakers or headphones, you'll be able to place each instrument in its own space, which also adds to the level of detail of the different parts in all of the compositions. So I found that the spatial characteristics sort of highlighted the musicality of the different lines of movement, and I was able to follow the pieces and, the movement in the lines even more closely because of the excellent recording. And so I found it really enjoyable. And in this case, the sonics served the performances in a really nice way that I could go in deeper to them.
Yeah, that's a good observation, in fact. I think that's one way this recording scores highly over the other ones. It's really the reason why I keep listening to these works, because I keep wanting to hear newer recordings to hear, because recording quality gets better and better as new techniques to record come across. I think this is an excellent album for that. If you really want to get to know these works well, this would be a good album to listen to. You really hear all the detail. It's fantastic. Anyway, and of course, lifted me up, changed me, like St. Paul said, as usual, with Mozart. I love Mozart's music. And there we go.
Transformed in an instant.
I am transformed in an instant.
That's
as
right.
St. Paul promised.
I'm waiting.
All right. Well, it should have happened already, man. I don't know. Anyway, maybe some of the upcoming jazz will transform you. We'll see. What do you got for us?
Well, at the beginning of summer, I was running out of releases and wondering what's going to go on. And then, for various reasons, we took a break. And coming back, now I have a long list of things coming up. And trying to categorize them now because
I've got that in classical music too.
Yeah, so many things. And, I want to get things out timely, not necessarily something that's come out right away because I want to give due diligence to listening to things, but I also want to have kind of a theme. However, the common theme in most of these are they're going back to a little bit earlier in July, and I have so many things in August and now September that have come out that I want to get to. But these are going back to some of the releases from July. And then the other theme, two other kind of things that tie them together are that they are all European musicians. And we've highlighted a lot of European jazz before. We've done a lot of Italian, French, Scandinavian jazz, which I'm really interested to find out what's going on internationally in jazz there. But then also these recordings, at least two of them, have a little bit different instrumentation, which is always interesting too. We're going to have some piano here. We always get a lot of piano, sax kind of releases, but we've got something a little bit different, which I think is always nice to look at too, to get some of the other instruments that we don't always think of as, the focus of jazz, to listen to a little bit more closely. And so we've got a European and a varied instrumentation theme going on this week, and we'll get these done in this episode. And then from next week, I'm going to look at my categories. We're going to have a little bit more probably American-heavy things, but getting into things that came out in August and September. Here we're going to go back to July for a few of these releases. And the first one is actually recommended by my bandmate and follower on Podbean of our podcast, Rob, who told me about this band, who actually performed here in Kyoto.
The band performed here in Kyoto.
Yeah, at the Deutsche University, a kind of concert series. I went to see one of the performances, not this group. Unfortunately, I missed them, but I really wish I had have been able to see this group because there's a really interesting combination here. The album is called Fractal Beauty, and it's on Skip Records. And we've got three musicians featured here. Probably the central figure is Klaus Paier, an accordionist from Austria, who I guess he's sort of a jazz-centered musician, but he brings a lot of other influences in here. And then we have the phenomenal woodwind player, Gerald Preinfalk, also Austrian, and he plays bass clarinet, and soprano saxophone. And what I have to say about him is he's such an amazing woodwind player. Soprano sax can be one of the most, I'm sorry, sax players, but it's one of the ugliest instruments in the hands of most.
I think sax players know that.
Yeah,
they see it as a challenge, to kind of make it appealing.
Yeah, it sounds somewhere between like one nostril blowing into a handkerchief and like some sort of bad European compact car, like a Yugo or Renault kind of, horn sound. But I have to say, Preinfalk keeps me on my toes because his soprano sax tone is so, pure that it's often hard to distinguish between that and his clarinet tone, especially when he's in the upper register. He has that pure of, a mastery of the instrument. So some really nice woodwind work here. And I apologize if I don't get the pronunciation right here, but a Croatian cellist, Asja Valcic.
Yeah, I can't help you there.
Yeah, I think that's happening. And I know, looking at resumes of Paier, that he's played with Valcic in various groups as a duo, and then this trio and other formations for more than a decade, so they're long-term music partners. And so we get this interesting trio here on all original compositions. Looking at sort of write-ups of this group, which unfortunately they don't have a lot of press, especially outside of Europe. But some of the German press called it chamber music jazz. And I hate to give a label to something, but that may be, if you take it in a good sense, a nice description of what you get here. If you take all of the technique and composition that you associate with bringing out the best of instruments from classical chamber music, but then also bring in really high-level compositions and jazz soloing ability, it maybe gives you an idea of what this music sounds like. And this is a release that sort of captures a real jazz spirit, but also brings in the technique and experience of very well-trained musicians. So this is a really interesting listen that brings a lot of influences and this unique instrumentation together. So the first track on this release, Fractal Beauty, is by Valcic, the cellist, and it's called Trismo. It starts with this really great dark and ominous bass clarinet figure. Bass clarinet is such a cool instrument. We don't get to hear a lot.
Yeah,
you're going to get to hear it on this album. It's worth it just for that. So we get that and a low cello, and then some high accordion tones that set a mood until this driving bass line emerges. Paier weaves really cool solo lines and then passes it off to Valcic for some wailing solo lines on the cello here. Then Preinfalk really conjures some serpents with his bass clarinet melodies. You're expecting, snakes to jump out at you. And the effect of the bass clarinet staccato bass is really cool. This is a really cool number to start out, sort of these kind of modalities that bring some ideas to you. Then we've got number 2, a Preinfalk composition called Main Street. This one has a lot of interesting tonal effects on the solo soprano sax opening. Everyone joins in, and the kind of syncopated disorder evokes a busy street. And a more even rhythm develops out of that with a plucked cello bass line for like 6 measures and then a few measures of stop time. So it sets up this sort of alternating pattern that draws you in. The sax carries solos along the busy street and then to the accordion and back to the original hectic scene for a bit, and a return to the other theme with another kind of hectic ending. So it's kind of a fun piece that takes you down a busy street on a little journey. Number 3 is a Paier original called Major Waltz. This one has a pulsing accordion and some lovely cello plucking that get the waltzing number started. There's some very nice unison accordion and clarinet, and then later cello and clarinet unison lines. I really like how Valcic's comfortable with playing the cello like a bass, too. She's all over her instrument in any style that it calls for, and the versatility really suits the music. So it's not quite a double bass, but she can cover that bass part when the piece calls for it, and so that's really cool. And Preinfalk plays some really great wailing clarinet lines in his solo near the end on this. The 4th track, Valcic, Into the Spring, her original composition. And here, Paier switches to bandoneon, South American accordion, so you get a little different style here. It's very rubato introduction, sets a quiet mood. The pretty cello line comes in with a melody backed by clarinet accompaniment. Then it sort of comes into a faster beat that gets established by the pulsing bandoneon here, and then Valcic solos on the cello. She then switches to a kind of pulsing and slapping bass while the clarinet solos, and then the clarinet restates the melody. We get back to some rubato cello for a close. A really nice moody piece here. 5, a Preinfalk original called Three Views. And we start with a real low accordion and cello tone, mysterious start. And then we get more bass clarinet coming in with very careful lines over these rising tide of tones. Then a beat develops with pulsing cello and accordion, and some more bass clarinet chaos kind of comes out of that. Things quiet down, and there's some bending pitches before the bass clarinet starts this really cool riff, and the cello and accordion solo over that with long backing lines before the ending. So kind of a piece that has a lot of twists and turns through different moods. 6, another Paier piece called Remember the Tango. It's a spirited unison lines from the accordion and soprano sax, and then the cello sets this dancing bowed pulse while the accordion swells behind that. Some really lovely bent notes and tones on the soprano sax here in the solo. And here you get to see, like, this guy has amazing soprano sax tone. You're not going to hear that instrument sound this nice. And what a passionate ending. This one's a real highlight of the album.
Yeah.
Then we get the title track on track 7, Valcic original Fractal Beauty. It's a really haunting cello opening. Becomes more interesting rhythmically, and then it's joined by some unison accordion, and after that soprano sax, and another really lovely toned soprano sax solo. Track 8, Not Larson by Preinfalk. We get clarinet and low register cello that introduce the slow melody. It's joined by some soft accordion backing, and around the midpoint, fluid, high-reaching clarinet solo. And despite the pretty melody, there's some really interesting tension-raising chromatics in the cello, where the line just raises by a semitone and then goes back down. That sort of creates some angst in the piece there. Number 9 is Mosaic by Paier. And this has got some chasing rhythmic lines that are traded off by each player, and then some come in unison. And there's a kind of slow 5-beat section that's headed by the sax that develops, and the mood changes. The cello really conjures some like dreadful tones here that lead into some lyrical bowing, and then the accordion sets a new tempo for some unison lines with the cello and bass clarinet. And then there's some really more of that cool bass clarinet staccato line thing. There's like his tongue creates this whole kind of reverb thing, and then the cello conjures some more kind of interesting tones here while the accordion solos. So you get a sense of the palette of sounds they can do on this Mosaic here. Number 10, another Preinfalk. I'm not sure how to pronounce this. Giogama.
Let me take a look here.
Yeah.
I don't have this file up.
This has a lilting low cello melody that waltzes over the accordion, and the bass clarinet takes over for a solo, and then more accordion and really nice warm cello tones right to the end. So it kind of highlights the tonal beauty of her cello playing. Track 11, another Klaus Paier original, Just Wonderful. And he's back on the bandoneon here, and it's a real slow showcase for the instrument from the beginning. It picks up midway with some clarinet and cello over some intense rhythms that drive to a dynamic ending. So nice piece. 12, another Valcic original, Gaia's Prayer. And this is a haunting slow cello melody over the accordion, and then the clarinet takes over the melody over another plucked cello bass section, and then the accordion takes a solo as well before the cello comes back for some more haunting tones. So it's a really unique instrumentation of this group. We get intriguing compositions, nice arrangements highlighting the abilities of each musician and what they can do with their instruments. And on top of that, some really high-level soloing, both in terms of technique and also kind of artistic direction, considering the themes of each piece. So, yeah, if you're looking for something that's still jazzy, but kind of crosses into the kind of chamber music thing with unique instrumentation, these are some wonderful musicians who bring lots of influences in there and have, gobs of technique, and the recording is really clear. And I enjoyed it a lot.
Great recording. Also, anything with a bass reed instrument on it is going to attract my attention. I want to say a little bit more about the accordion, which I enjoyed a lot. There are no drums on this album, so the accordion is really setting the rhythm with its kind of like phrasing, and I found that he's actually really good at it, so that it really made it work for me. Usually it's that kind of this sort of thing puts me off. As the record went on, I really started to warm to it and really enjoyed it a lot. I liked the the variety of sounds you were getting, not just the bass clarinet, like you said, the soprano, and the different sounds that the cello was able to make. The accordion was the anchor all the way through, and I really enjoyed listening to the accordion. It's not an instrument we hear enough of unless you happen to be on the streets of Paris walking around somewhere and some guy's trying to collect money from you for his admittedly good playing, but but it's nice to hear it in a professional context on an album like this. And so I really enjoyed this as something that's different, just a little bit outside the mainstream.
You certainly don't think of it as, jazzy, right?
Jazzy,
jazz accordion, no.
Boy, that word jazz is so abused, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Like in dance, they have jazz hands.
Oh.
What does that have to do with jazz? Where did that come from? Where did that expression come from?
Yeah, it's a shame because we should hear more kind of accordion.
We should hear more accordion, yeah.
And, it does get introduced in, sort of South American
There's sort of a romantic, almost carefree feeling to it. I rather like that. It manages both at the same time. It sets a romantic mood.
Yeah.
And it's not weighty, so it kind of, it puts you in a good feeling place, I think.
And I think the sort of pulsing quality of, the squeeze of and the sort of uniqueness you can get of both directions on the instrument give it a lot of possibilities that you don't have with a wind instrument or with a normal keyboard instrument. And so it can sort of create a different ambiance that both can be sustained or percussive in a piece, and that's sort of a unique appeal that it can add to something. And so this is a unique combination of instruments, but yet they've figured out how to maximize the appeal of not just those instruments, but what each individual musician is able to create on those. And this probably won't get heard by enough, people around the world. Most of the press on it is all in German, and I had to look at it and kind of translate it and figure it out. But definitely take a listen to this for something high level and unique. That's both jazz.
Let's spread the word around the English-speaking world.
Jazz, yeah. So definitely, if they come back to Kyoto, I will go and see them.
Yeah, you've given away where the mountain lair is now. Oh man, kept it a secret for 29 episodes. 29
episodes, yeah, that's right. At least it's not Tokyo.
That's okay.
All right. Well,
we're definitely not Tokyo. Yeah.
Continuing on, in the European jazz release vein, got an up and coming, another Italian pianist.
Yeah.
We've done that before. We'll keep doing that. This is Alessandro Lanzoni.
Nice name.
Yeah.
It's a very musical name.
His newest release, Mirage. And this is actually, we've got 2 releases on this label. Fresh Sound, New Talent. And Lanzoni got the award for Top Jazz in 2013 as Best New Talent of the Year, which is decided by the most qualified Italian journalists on behalf of the Musica Jazz magazine. And so he's been around for a little while now as a recognized talent in the Italian jazz scene. And his training as a musician started developing in various directions. He did classical studies, leading to a diploma of piano, which he got in 2012 from the Cherubini of Florence Conservatory. And after that, he did jazz studies, both in the summer courses of Siena Jazz and at Berklee College of Music in Boston. And from there, he's played a lot of Italian jazz music festivals. Also, he's got a variety of talents and versatility. He also took up the study of cello and composition, which he got a specialist degree in composition and jazz arrangement from the Conservatory of Florence. So he does have a kind of wide-ranging talent in music. And from a very young age, he was featured in some Italian music festivals, Umbria Jazz, Ravello Festival, Roma Casa del Jazz, and various other festivals as a performer. And so, in addition to that, he's played as a sideman on a lot of other projects, including one of my favorites, the Italian trumpeter Fabrizio Bosso, other performers, Gianni Basso, lots of other players that he's played with. But here he's with his own trio, also featuring Thomas Morgan on bass and Eric McPherson on drums. And so we've got here a program of originals and some other jazz musician originals and one standard. So interesting program here.
I just want to mention before you go, his trio, Eric McPherson and Thomas Morgan, these are two guys that I actually know a lot better than I know him. So it's quite the lineup he's got there. He's got some all-stars in his trio, and yet he's the leader.
He's bursting out into a more international scene from the Italian scene.
I think Thomas Morgan plays with Bill Frisell a lot. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Eric McPherson I know too. I'm kind of not getting where I get him from yet, but I'll give it a search here. Hold on.
Yeah, and I think these players draw out, and we can get an idea for his musical personality from this release. So we start out with When Lights Are Low, an often-covered tune by Benny Carter. And this one starts out to a nice swing on this tune, which you're a jazz fan, you've probably heard many people play. Towards the end of the melody and into his solo, Lanzoni shows some really interesting kind of penchant for harmonizations and really dense chords. He really likes to layer his chords thickly, which is kind of interesting characteristic of his playing. At the same time, he has a really nice lilting touch in his right hand that balances out those thick chords. And he also does leave a lot of space between his lines and phrases so he can digest what he's just done, which is always a nice characteristic and kind of mature quality of soloing. He does insert some more dissonant chords in his solo here before Morgan takes over for a while with a rather relaxed bass solo. And then Lanzoni returns for some more playful adventurousness when he brings the melody back. You get the feeling right from the start on this track that he's a spontaneous player, and I think he doesn't plan things out so much, but he likes to do what's going to sound cool or what he feels in the moment.
I actually thought this was the standout track on the album, by the way, When the Lights Are Low.
Really cool.
It came in really positively and bright, and I just
Yeah, with some unexpected things.
Yeah.
Number 2, John Coltrane's Moment's Notice, which has a story behind it. I won't go into it, but jazz fans will know how he sprung that on people in the studio. Here, the solo piano has Lanzoni darting around the changes before the bass and drum kick in at kind of a driving tempo. And Lanzoni shows a really agile right hand over his choppy left-hand chords, and he builds up his solo, balancing out dissonance and nice melodies too. And he drives it all the way to the end with some flourish here. So nice to see this old Coltrane piece performed here. And then we've got a few originals lined up here. Number 3, A Pretty Hunt, and this is credited to all the players in the trio, so I guess they worked this out together. It's a rubato original ballad with some pretty chords. We get some bass fills and soft tom-tom work by McPherson that fill out the spaces nicely, and it quiets toward the end. It's sort of a one-arc piece that doesn't trade off solos, so they sort of just build this up together, always sort of featuring the piano as the centerpiece. And I like this kind of playing as just a whole tune rather than trading off solos, for each track as sort of, an exercise. So they seem to have worked this out together, just featuring the piano. So I thought it was a nice original piece.
It's really pretty, especially the gentle chords at the beginning were nice.
Yeah.
One point about this, I could swear I heard like the song Jada. It's a really old jazz song from, Jada, Jada, Jing, Jing, Jing. I think I swear I heard little fragments of that in the chords.
It's kind of evocative of that, yeah.
Yeah.
And it does have a lot of spaces that sort of fill out with that. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
I guess everything sounds like something, right? So
yeah, but
yeah.
I don't know. I heard that. Say, this kind of this. He's definitely thinking of something.
Yeah, I don't know if it was Georgia on my mind. I was thinking of two.
You thought Georgia on my mind? I heard Jada.
Yeah. Then it builds into number 4, Tornado. It's another original track credited to all 3 of the musicians. This one's an adventurous exchange between piano and bass phrases that gradually builds into a steady rhythm. Here he gets to explore a lot of dissonant sounds. And then he has this real fun with a Latin vamp, keeping those harmonic tensions. So this dun da dun 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 dun, something you hear in Latin music, but not with these harmonies. So he uses those unique harmonies with that rhythm for a little bit of fun. And then he later explores some sort of polyrhythmic ideas over McPherson's beat. So there's a lot of things going on in this tune, both harmonically and rhythmically. The bass gives us an alternating kind of syncopated line to the ending. And you can tell by now that Lanzoni enjoys this type of freedom and contrast, and he can make something interesting inside of it. So I don't think he wants to play in just sort of let's do jazz standards or something. He likes to have a structure, but with an amount of freedom in it, and he trusts himself to sort of land on his feet in that kind of thing. And I like that about him. But yet the album still has some more surprises coming up. Track 5, Hyperbole. This is his own original composition. This is a slow ballad that starts with piano and bass and only the faintest drum brushing from McPherson. It's barely there. It's a nice balance of big blocky chords and then some cascading right-hand lines before an unhurried bass solo. There's a lot of space to breathe in this sparse piece. Very dense final chords. This is something else. I like that he's able to leave big gaps and places to breathe. It is music, and this one, sort of in contrast to the other pieces. I kind of like that. Number 6, another one of his original compositions, Mirage. And this one is samba beated original. Again, Lanzoni balances kind of wistful right-hand phrases with big, fully voiced chords. When he has a chance, he will, fill his chords out, to be really lush harmonizations. The end of the song structure has kind of this cool intervallic riff. It's a really cool hook, and so they're not going to waste that in this song. So it comes in the melody, comes at the end of the piano solo, comes at the bass solo, and then at the ending of the song. So you get to hear that. It gives you something to hang on to with the improvisations, and it's kind of a cool feature of the song.
He has like a really weighty, like heavy tone in this style.
Yeah,
like he plays really loudly.
Yeah,
I noticed.
And that riff is really cool. It pulls you back. Number 7. This one is way out there.
Yeah.
This is called "Call Me Now," and this one is credited to all 3 players. At the beginning, you'll wonder if the numbers has started. You have to turn up the volume a lot, and then you're going to hear this kind of faint sound, which I think is piano string strumming.
It sounds like he's strumming with his fingernails inside the piano.
Strumming inside the piano, and then like rubbing one string up and down for this sort of ingratiating tone. And then if you crank up the volume to hear that, then you'll have to turn it down when the bass comes in. It comes in with this kind
Fortunately, I had headphones on for this one, so I could hear it faintly far away.
And the bass comes in with, I called it a sneaking patrol. It's sort of like Wile E. Coyote kind of sneaking around the scene. And then the drums come in for some more mystery. There's some kind of huge dissonant piano clusters. And then, I don't know, that's about it. So I'm not really sure what they're going for here, if it's anything greater than that. But I didn't pull anything more out of it. So
yeah, some cool harmonics emerged from the piano during this. But this was kind of shapeless, I thought. It kind of didn't really... Call Me Now. I wonder what he's trying to say with that title.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. But definitely something different. And then the next tune, Nobody Else But Me, the standard Jerome Kern tune. This one comes right out of the gate with a nice bouncing swing start. Lanzoni works in some two-handed chorded rhythmic lines in between his swinging phrases. And then he lets out a nice grunt.
At this point, from this point of the album on, there's a lot of vocalizing, from the musician. I'm wondering about that as well.
Yeah.
I wonder if the programming was decided on where the vocalizing came in or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But
kind of like Glenn Gould at the piano, or you actually hear a lot of this on old jazz albums as well. So
yeah, the grunt comes out before the bass takes a nice bouncy solo, and the drums get a spot too. And there's some nice punchy rhythms at the end, and yet still a few surprises after that. So I like how a lot of times in this album, you think you're coming to the end, but there's still some surprises in how he's going to wrap things up. So he keeps you on your toes to the end. And then another big surprise, the last tune, Coda, which also is credited to all the musicians. This is not a jazz improvised piece. This is a very composed piece that is based over very slow, sustained chords with a very processed kind of
process is the word I wrote here.
Over sustained chords, and it's really a feature for bowed bass, which is done really nicely and features the bass, but it's really a different character in the sense of a coda, a different ending for the album, just showing something different in the style, but it really takes you to a different place here. I think this is my first listening to Lanzoni myself, but he shows an adventurous style, kind of comfort with working with different structures, which I liked. On this program, we've got one standard, two other jazz artist originals, and then we get two rather unusual tunes. One is unorthodox, and then one quite peaceful, in addition to the other original works. I found Lanzoni's style is interesting. His dense harmonies stick out to me, something that's essential to his style. But he seems to like a kind of unpredictability and looseness in the structure that he can draw kind of spontaneous things out of. Now, I found his playing very competent and interesting. Kind of has this tension sprung, ready to release when he's inspired at the right moment. And so I'm interested to hear more of what he does next.
Yeah, I'd like to hear a little bit more of this pianist too. But I have to say, this album, there were some real high points on it. I really liked the first track a lot. But that adventurousness in some of the tracks kind of put me off a bit, if I'm going to be really honest. Like the coda, I kind of, I know, it didn't feel like it belonged there. There was also, we talked about Call Me Now. I kind of felt like I didn't know where it was going, which is probably what he wants. And I guess like I had heard this after the next recording we're going to hear, so I think I was kind of in this really good feeling mood. He's put together a program that kind of goes into like some darkish places, let's say, or heavy places, let's say. All right. So he's a really good player. I just thought this was a bit of a mixed bag. It was, I'd like to hear more from him, though. I'd like to hear what else he's going to do.
I agree.
That's what I'll say about it.
It's a bit of a kind of run and fetch it kind of thing.
Right.
It doesn't hang quite together. I mean, for my first impression, it gave me, a variety of things to see what he can do. But like I say, the Call Me Now and then Coda are sort of, they're out there. So you got to run out and then come back.
You know what I thought of? I think, was it last week or 2 weeks ago that we heard the one by that pianist with, he had that piece, Office Politics 101. I forget what that was called.
Trumpeter.
What was that?
Yeah. Rodriguez, yeah.
Yeah, those two should get together, him and Lanzoni. I bet they'd make a pretty
music. Yeah.
It could be dangerous music.
Yeah. It could be.
Yeah. If I ever meet both of them, I'm going to say, hey, you could probably get them together and see what happens.
Yeah.
Cause the end of jazz or something.
Yeah, you can go in different directions, but especially when it's your first impression of a player, sometimes, we're wondering, okay, where were they going on this one? But anyway, let's hear more from Lanzoni. There seems to be a nice crop of young Italian jazz pianists with original ideas. We've heard a few of them on our podcast here. And,
all right.
Hear what they do next. And then, staying in the European theme and jumping to another instrument we don't hear enough of. But here, we're going to hear it in a really interesting way. We're going
to hear a lot of it, too.
Countdown on the same label, Fresh Sound, New Talent, by the French vibraphonist Simon Moullier. Moullier. And here he is on vibraphone on his sophomore release, second one. I think the last one came out even last year. And his compatriots on bass, Luca Alemano on bass, and then on drums, a Korean drummer, Jong Kook Kim. And so this is a really tasty trio here. The notes and press releases emphasize timekeeping and rhythmic features as being an integral part of this release with momentum. And I picked that up on this album. And I guess his previous album, which came out just last year, which I didn't hear, was a larger ensemble setting. So we've got just trio here. And I'm glad I got to hear this one first. And so this one focuses on jazz standards or other well-known pieces by jazz musicians. And there's a lot to dig into here. So we start with the title track, Countdown, which all jazz fans will know as a John Coltrane composition from Giant Steps. On this version, we're going to get a new intro instead of the original drum solo and then sax opening over the drums at this wicked high pace. Here, it's a little bit different in the intro, a little bit more laid back tempo, but once the chords come in, you're going to recognize the flow of this piece. Mundi shows impressive technique and creativity negotiating the chord changes here. And you also pick up that he likes to vocalize while he plays.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He does. I heard this in headphones, and he does this a lot.
And it comes out through this whole album. It's a rather short track at just over 3.5 minutes. You're also going to get a taste of the really tasty drum fills by Kim here. He's a really tight and tasty drummer through this whole album, and that shows up right in the first track.
Speaking of the vocalizing, it kind of sounds to me like Moullier, you almost get the feeling that you can almost hear, like he's putting his whole being into his playing. You know, he's really a virtuosic player. There's a lot of speed and all kinds of incredible technique on display, and you feel like he's using his body to such like a degree that the sounds just have to come out of his mouth too, just to make that entire effort. I kind of made fun of this sort of thing in Extreme Music, my novel, with try to get to the exact extreme of what the human body can do, sort of thing. But it's not a criticism here. I really enjoyed this, but this guy, man, he's really something. I remember we had when I was in college, we had a drummer who was always playing. He kind of played over everything. And we used to make fun of him by saying we'd have him playing, and we imagined him yelling out, "Help, I need more drums to play." He didn't have enough drums. I almost felt like Moullier is kind of like that. He needs more bars on the vibraphone because he needs more things to play.
This is definitely
he's a very busy
player. Like chimes of lullaby to put you to sleep.
Yeah, absolutely not.
And checking him out on YouTube, he's also got some of the things. He's got his vibraphone, and he's got his wooden xylophone, and he's got effects like auto wah pedals on some stuff. So he's a very intense player. He's bursting with energy, which comes out through this release as his style.
All the way through. It was actually really exhausting to listen to, although I loved it. I thought this was a really great album. I liked it a lot.
It was very cool. He really...
I was tired at the end, though.
He infuses this album with his energy. So the second track is Work, Felonious Monk tune. And this one, right from the start, gets an infectious and hypnotic rhythm on the vibes that's aided with a nice groove through the bass. He gets some monk spirit with some tight mallet work. And then about 4.5 minutes into the tune, he develops this mesmerizing figure. It's just like, this repeated thing that will put you in a trance. And that goes on until he gets a clean break, and it snaps you out of it, and then going into something new. There's a nice rolling drum figure under all of it here, always getting a really cool groove. So it's kind of a real nice interpretation of this monk work. Then we switch gears into a standard, the old Cole Porter, I Concentrate on You, but it gets a little bit different treatment with a samba beat here.
Yeah.
He plays the melody really straight. However, he is able to add a lot of tasty fills around that as he lets the notes hang, which you can get this nice sustain on the vibraphone. While that melody is hanging, he'll be filling in all of these little tasty things around it. And so it's one of his abilities to get in, and with his articulation, you'll always hear the melody when he's playing these tunes, and then he'll be filling in with all these little counterpoint lines around that. And it's really cool. He can get a really like jazz piano type approach when he wants, which he shows off on these well-known standards and gives due diligence to the sort of presentation of the melodies. His solo here also is very melodic, and then he stitches the lines together with really nice voice leading. So although he may take some adventurous harmonic steps, when he connects the phrases, they're all really logically based with nice voice leading, which I liked. Number 4 is the Mingus tune, Goodbye Pork Pie Hat. And here we get a nice slow and very dirty groove, some bluesy lines and interesting rhythms that he develops over the basics here, and a really nice bass solo too. Number 5, the kind of jazz standard tune, Nature Boy, but this one is done in a little different way. It's developed over a groove which has a nice kind of descending bass glissando.
Yeah. He had this really sticky sound too, too. It's really kind of cool.
Like you have to wash your hands after listening to this one, but it's cool and groovy. This tune has really nice bass and drum work, and a killer bass solo.
Yeah, I wrote that too. Yeah. Gets a big solo.
This was great. And Moullier jumps from hypnotic backing over the bass solo to his own intense solo. And in the mallets, you can just see like little balls flying everywhere on this one. Yeah, this is another highlight here. And they return to the melody for a bit, but they jam out on the end. So really cool arrangement. Number 6, the familiar Bill Evans tune, Turn Out the Stars. If you like Bill Evans, you've probably heard this tune many times. This is a good straight-ahead swinging treatment of this tune. Another melodic bass solo added here as well, so a nice little tribute to Bill Evans' own composition. Number 7, Jerome Kern. The song is You, and this one's got a nice arrangement. The intro is very short and bluesy, but when the tune comes in, it's given a samba beat, so a little bit different from what you usually hear. They add some nice syncopated ends to the phrases of the melody, kind of thing that's not in the original composition, so that makes it unique. And Moulier's solo here is very melodic. And he starts with some phrases that he can't help but sing along to.
And like, neither can we. No, I'm just kidding.
The melody of this tune, da, 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 is great. But in his solo, he has his own new melody, and he's like really like, he should be proud of it because it sounds great. But then he sings with that, and then they get a great vamp going before the bridge of the tune comes in after the solo. So. Yeah, this is another great arrangement, but his enthusiasm is just like, it forged through. Yeah.
I want to mention something that's been happening throughout the album, too, that I noticed on this track, too. He gets this fantastic, like, staccato sound on the vibraphone. Mm-hmm. It's not something I'm used to hearing. Most vibraphonists want the note to ring because it'll go on for a long, long time. It's got those motors that sort of, keep the sustain going. Yeah. Yet and you can hear he's like stopping the note with his hand, sort of like he'll hit the bar and he'll and it's just a fantastic sound. You just don't hear that so often. I was really intrigued by that. He does it on quite a few tracks, but very noticeable here.
Yeah, he does that. What I also noticed is like he does like a glissando, but with a muted. I don't know if he's using his hand or something with the pedal, but and he'll get this like muted glissando, like, and it's almost like a blip, and you're like, what? But then he's off to something else. So he's got a lot of stylistic things that are.
He's pretty. Nice. He's very virtuosic.
Yeah, great technique. The next track, we go a little Brazilian here. Beijo Partido,
yes,
Broken Kiss by Toninho Horta. You may know this tune from Milton Nascimento and other Brazilian artists. So this one is really kind of lush chords and halting bass line intro into the kind of smooth beginning to this Brazilian classic. Past midway through the tune, though, the vibes and bass get a riff together, and the drums come back on like a busier kind of doubled up rhythm, so it changes character midway through, which is kind of cool. Then we shift gears again completely on next track with the Tad Dameron tune, Hot House. So this one starts out with drum fills over the syncopated intro riff, and then Moullier shows off his bop chops on this one, racing over the changes. So he's really off to the bebop steeplechase here. Things are really flying along on this one, but man, do they keep the rhythm locked tight as a trio. And Kim gets to do some more tasty drum work over the riff part from the beginning again. So this shows their tightness and some bop chops here.
Yeah, some high-speed rhythmic trickery, too, I wrote here. The walking bass is more like a sprinting bass, actually.
Yeah, it's really, really out of the gate on this one. Yeah. And finally, we end up with another Monk tune, Ask Me Now. And this one's different in character. We get a loping swing that's set by the bass for the vibe melody, and the drums just sit this one out, which is cool. Because Moullier and Alemanno have really grooved into this swing here. And they both get melodic swinging solos. And we don't miss the drums because everything is super rhythmic. But it also lets the sustain on the vibes ring out a little bit more without the drums filling up that sound. And so it's a little nice change of pace to close out the set. So in sum, a satisfying set of songs with really good arrangements, some different rhythms and intros, little kind of riffs and things that are different from the original or standard arrangement of tunes. The trio is very tight, tasty drumming and bass playing behind the vibraphone. Moullier is bursting with energy and ideas, almost too much for one album, actually.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get Grandpa's sleepy vibraphone here. No way. You're going to have a lot of staccato skull beating, meloding in a good way here. Lots of melodic things, cool harmonies. And we should hear more vibraphone like this. And so this is only a second album as a leader. I hope this spurs some more vibraphone talent in Europe and abroad to, do some more interesting jazz things. There's not a lot. You don't hear vibraphone a lot these days, but this reminds me that it can be
just
so
like
cool.
the Hammond organ. It's got to come back,
Yeah.
They were great vibraphonists when I was younger. In fact, you might have said that thing about Grandpa's vibraphone. I'm trying to imagine my grandfather playing the vibraphone. It just the picture doesn't add up somehow. It's like trying to imagine. It's like trying to imagine Santa Claus scuba diving or something. It's just a picture I can't quite conjure up.
Yeah. Well, what was it we heard? We had vibes back always. Wolfgang Lagerschmidt, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the guy
that was
who
before
played
the podcast, right? That was we didn't talk about this in the podcast, did we?
Yeah, we did because
we did.
Yeah, it was a name that there's a lot of jazz vibraphonists that.
Oh yeah, we did do it. I remember.
Yeah,
but it was long. It was long
the
ago.
one
It
who
must
had
have been in March or April.
Yeah, he was the one who had become known in the late '70s for playing with Chet Baker. But
right.
He had just
I remember.
released
Yeah,
his
so
new
it
one.
was
So
okay.
That was our only other vibraphone feature, I think.
Yeah, this is a younger guy. I guess
young and full of youth and vigor. So applaud
he
it.
sure is.
Yeah, keep smacking those mallets.
I'm not even playing. Just by listening, he made me exhausted. But it was kind of a satisfied, exhilarated kind of exhaustion. I really liked this album a lot. I also liked, we didn't talk about the sound. I liked the rich, full sound it got. I was wondering if the vibraphone, it doesn't distort or anything. It sounds great, but I was wondering if the mic was a little too close. I really don't know how vibraphones are mic'd. Is it the bars or is it by the tubes at the bottom? I really don't know what they do.
It's got to be by the tubes because I remember playing in a jazz ensemble, looking at them, they operate on this, to get to sustain, there's a rotating rod with, that flips these discs inside of the tubes under each thing when you get the sustain pedal. So I would imagine the mic has to be somewhere below there. But looking at Mullier's sort of performances on YouTube, he also does use some effects. For some of his performances, he's got like an auto wah effect that he gets on there. So I'm not really sure if he has some various types of pickup or non-traditional kind of miking or something there. But the sound is good, and
it was recorded really close. And I think at the end of tracks 9 and 10, I was listening in headphones, and I made out this kind of like sort of processed sort of sound going. I was kind of wondering what was making that. It must have been one of the effects, huh?
Listening to those, I think, like I said, he may use this kind of muted kind of glissando thing where he drags the mallets across.
It might have been that,
the
maybe,
bars,
but it was so faint. I thought it was just
very faint. Yeah. I think that's actually his acoustic effect of doing that. But if you look at his YouTube videos, you'll see that he does use some kind of effects in his live performances. So I'm not really sure. But being a young guy, I think he's probably open to modern tonal possibilities with equipment and things, which is all cool. Anyway, Simon, if you care to fill us in on the technical details, drop us a line here. Because we'd like to hear more from you in the future. This is a cool label. I like the name of that label, Fresh Sound, New Talent.
This was probably my favorite, the most appealing jazz album that I heard this week. Although I did like the first one too. That was a different vibe to it.
It's a different thing,
I like that one too. And of course, in classical, it was the Ólafsson Mozart. That might be one of our albums of the year, which we will disclose to you in December.
Yeah, he has top something 10 special for sure, and I think we're going to have hopefully many more years of his contributions to ponder.
Well, I'm already looking forward to next week. I hope we got some good stuff up there. I've got some interesting things. We'll see. And
it's going to be a good show.
Yeah, next week. And then not this week, but next week, midweek, we're going to do our take on all the Grammophon Award winners and nominees and ones we've heard anyway, because we're not going to be able to hear them all. There are too many. By the end of the year, I hope to have heard them all. But
enough time to pick out the winners, yes.
Yeah, I think we can hear all the winners between us, so we're trying to do that.
Yeah, well, lots of things coming up. I've certainly got a backlog. You do too, so we're going to get them packaged up into a good consumable arrangement. It'll be interesting to see what comes up in the next few weeks.
Yeah. All right.
So this has been episode 29 of Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. And thanks for sticking with us to the end. Please do like, subscribe on whatever platform you're at. Remember, you can hear all the tunes in one single place on the Adult Music Podcast playlist, which you'll find only on Deezer, or you can come over to Podbean and see us on our host, where you'll find links to Apple Music and Spotify individually for each release that we discuss this week and every week. And please do give us a rating. Send a comment to us by email at adultmusicpodcast@gmail.com. And we'll be back again next week with 6 more releases covering jazz and classical music and things that have come out in recent weeks. We'd love to hear from you if you have any comments. But until then, we'll see you again next time.
Have a good week, everybody. Bye.